Good evening and welcome to the January 25th, 2023 East Lansing Planning Commission. Peter, would you please call roll?
Happily. Chair Sullivan.
Here.
Vice Chair Bullman is absent this evening. Commissioner Williams.
Here.
Commissioner Lapine is also absent this evening. Commissioner Wagner.
Here.
Commissioner Hendricks is not here yet. Commissioner Boyd.
Here.
Commissioner Denault.
Here.
We have the required 5 members for quorum tonight.
Thank you. On to item 1.2, approval of tonight's agenda. Is there a motion?
Move the approval of the agenda.
Second.
Okay, there was a motion by Commissioner Williams and a second by Commissioner Wagner. Is there all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. All right, granted. On to item 1.3, approval of the minutes from the 1/11/23 draft minutes of the Planning Commission. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve the draft minutes.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Boyd and seconded by Commissioner Denault. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. On to item number 2, committee reports. Commissioner Wagner, do you have anything to share from the Community Development Advisory Committee?
Sure. So 2 weeks ago, we met, the CDBG met to, we met with the applicants for the funding for this upcoming year. It was really interesting to hear, to read all the proposals, to see what people want to do. There's some really inspiring projects happening in our community. And tomorrow night we're going to meet to talk about the divvying up of the money. So tomorrow night is going to be the big meeting that we have to figure out who gets what and make our recommendation to City Council. So I think that will probably wrap it up tomorrow, but it's been, a month long, 5 weeks of really interesting discussions and meeting people from other committees. It's been great. So next time we meet, I'll have I don't know how much I can tell you about our suggestions, but I can give you a little report on that next time we meet.
Great. Thank you for the update. Appreciate it. On to item number 3, staff reports. Mr. Menser?
Thank you very much. So during this time, I usually just go over some items that have been on the council agenda and then anything that is upcoming on your agenda. And I think I went at length last time about kind of future things, but I'm going to pull that up while I'm talking here. But at the council meeting, they did meet on Tuesday, January 17. There were some other items on the agenda, but relevant to the Planning Commission. There was a very brief discussion about the 5G small cell installations that are proposed in the city. I'm sure a lot of you have seen. This is not an item that the Planning Commission is very likely going to see, but I'd want to provide the update because you are in community liaisons, in a sense. The one brief update is that we are planning on, not we, the applicant, the ultimate applicant and the company that's going to be installing these, or that's proposing to install these installations, are going to be at the February 14 discussion-only council meeting to share the plan with council and answer any questions. And then they're also looking to hold a public input session potentially on coming up here, and I'll have a date for you at the next meeting. So there may be 2 opportunities for public comment on that project. That was really the item from that. And then council did meet last night in this room and discussed very briefly next steps for the 27-acre city-owned property at Coleman and West. As you know, there have been a lot of changes in the city infrastructure in the last couple of weeks. So if you get a chance to check out that item, I went before council and really just requested that the council consider a pause on that process for now. As you know, the city issued a request for proposals for housing, for a project that would address missing middle housing. And there's going to be an opportunity probably to revisit the scope of what might occur at that site in the future. And so really that project is on hold for now. There were three proposals, and council will be revisiting kind of the entire scope for that project here in the upcoming. So I'll continue to keep this group in the loop on where all that goes. And that's the end of my report. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Peter. On to item number 4. Are there any commissioner announcements? Seeing none. Item 5, communications from citizens. There are 2 communications in the agenda packet regarding the Valley Court Park proposal. Are there any members of the audience that would like to, okay, please. This is typically to discuss matters on or off the agenda.
I'm Doug Heilman. I live at 1417 Farwood Drive in East Lansing. And in response to the new plans that came out for the pavilion at Valley Court Park, I'm very disappointed that not more was changed from the initial proposal. I feel like there would, I was told it was going back to the drawing board, that with the comments I'd heard from other people and the comments that I had expressed, that there might be some more changes, more noticeable changes. I will reiterate, I think that the pavilion is too big. It's not placed in the proper place. It's in your face. Coming down Albert, there's this term they use, bookend. I don't know exactly what that means other than downtown basically ends. Well, you're ending it early by having that pavilion right there at the end of that street, which is so narrow. It certainly isn't a nice entryway into the park. The bookend should be at the far end of the park where the park ends, if there's going to be a bookend. I'm disappointed that I'm sorry. I'm disappointed that the comments that I heard were not, and that I gave, were not given more weight. I'm not sure exactly who all sits down and decides, well, we're going to pay attention to these comments, but not these comments, or, you know, we still want it here, so just forget what everybody said about that, because we want to come down Albert Street and see it right there front and center. It makes no sense to me. It's oversized. I want to know where the data is and the studies are that have made people believe that this is the right size for this market. I've been to the farmers market over and over and over, and even when it's busy, it's not so busy that we need all these extra spaces. It's overkill, and if you look online, farmers markets are becoming a fad, and they're not a long-term solution to anything, really. You can buy organic produce at the supermarket and local produce at the supermarket, and you know, yes, it's nice that somebody in the neighborhood can walk and get some produce and that type of thing, but it's really a fad. The park needs money to maintain it as it is. It should be a glowing, beautiful green space that East Lansing is proud of and to put the money into. It's always been a problem with the drainage, of course. It's nothing but dandelion weeds in the summer. You can't even spread a blanket out and enjoy a lawn, because it's not a lawn, it's a weed patch, and it rarely goes, it frequently goes unmowed for weeks and weeks. If you can't maintain the park as it is, how are you going to maintain the park and a pavilion? The new plan calls for an entrance off of Hillcrest Court. That road, Hillcrest Court, needs a lot of work. I don't know if that's budgeted into this project. We've been told that this project, that there would be phases for improvements to the park, but there are no phases. That's just some lip service as far as I know. I don't know if there are phases. I'd like to hear about the phases. What is planned for phase 2? I'm just very disappointed that more changes weren't made to the plan, and I will be doing all I can to see that it doesn't go through the way it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Menser?
Thank you. I just wanted to note that I did receive one more email that was actually sent to council. So on this project that is not included in your packet, it was an email from, and if he's watching at home, Bert Seafarth, and it was sent directly to City Council. It kind of came on my radar. It was sent to me, and I didn't include it in the packet. That was my fault. So I'm going to send it out to you after this meeting, and I will include it in the meeting packet for next time. But I want to assure anyone that sees this meeting that this not only will be in your next packet. One, it was transmitted to City Council, so it'll be in whatever relevant City Council meeting packet. It may have been in the one last night. I didn't see it, and then it'll be part of all communications. So what you're seeing in the meeting packet are just 2 recent communications, but all of them are going to live with this project. If it goes anywhere and where it goes, these will live with it. So just want to make that point. And so you'll see this letter soon.
Commissioner Williams?
I'm just wondering, Peter, if you'd mind reading the email. I mean,
Yeah,
we're here to
I can do that.
consider it and
No, that's a
hear
great
about
idea.
it. And so while we're on the subject, I think it would be helpful to hear the communication. I don't want it to
I will
get
do that.
lost.
And yep, okay.
Peter, before you do, is this in addition to the email that he had sent us on the 18th? Did he send us? Because that one is in our agenda.
Okay, this
packet.
is he was sent on Saturday, January 21.
Okay, got it. So it's an additional email. Thank
Okay.
you. Yeah, go ahead.
And before I start, any inflection is unintended. I'm just going to read it as plain as I can. And if any intent, so I just want to make that clear. I'm going to do my very best to be as neutral sounding as possible. The latest pavilion plan is no better than the first. Smack dab in the middle of Valley Court, making what's left of green space of no good technical or aesthetic use. This drawing looks like a cutout from a book showing similar plans that were built in other places with a total lack of consideration for the specific characteristics of Valley Court Park. In fact, it could be very well be a cut and paste job from other work on file. The plan is wasteful in the extreme. I can't imagine that any thoughtful design efforts were in play when this was accomplished. The creators should be embarrassed. Were this a student project in a design class, it would fail. I don't want to hear that it wouldn't fit elsewhere because that assumes the footprint as exists is set in stone and can't be changed. That's a false argument. It's just computer-generated images. It needs to be rejected and sent back to the drawing board. If the responsible firm can't do it better, if the responsible firm can't do better, then find one that can. This is expediency, fake planning, and wasteful of public funds. If, at this time, Council and the Planning Commission haven't the interest and energy to give this pavilion plan anything but a cursory look, then doing nothing until then would be a better decision. That's from Bert Seafarth, and I apologize if I butchered that name, at 340 North Lawn in East Lansing.
Thank you, Mr. Menzer. Are there any other members of the public that wish to speak? Seeing none, do we have anyone in the queue?
There is nobody waiting in the queue.
All right. On to item number 6, public hearings. There are none tonight. So item number 7, old business. 7.1 is consideration of site plan application to construct approximately 6,774 square feet of additions to a building located at 3410 West Road. Peter?
Yeah, thank you. So the Planning Commission held a public hearing on this at its last meeting on January 11. There is a memo in your meeting packet that, where is it here? I think mine is loading correctly. No, I may have uploaded the wrong one. I can actually change that pretty quickly, but I don't know if that would be appropriate. I think I uploaded the wrong staff memo to this, to our agenda. So I'm not sure what you guys are seeing, but I am, oh, it's at the very bottom. Okay, sorry about that. At the very bottom, if you click on the link, so the staff memo at the very bottom, I think it starts on page, looks like 39, you'll see a brief memo for me just summarizing the request. As our chair just pointed out, the total additions total about 5,500 square feet, and there's also a 1,200 square foot HVAC chiller accessory building on the east side of the property, and then they are proposing to modify the parking lot. So what you're seeing in this memo then is a draft. Based on what I heard at the public hearing, I drafted a motion to recommend approval to council of the site plan application. You do have 3 options to approve this: approve it with conditions or deny it. What I'm proposing and in the memo here is that there is a motion, and then there are, looks like 15 conditions, and a lot of these are boilerplate, but they are specific to this project. So I'm going to walk through those conditions really briefly, and they're typical as to the kind of condition we would put on a project like this. So the first couple are really just approving this plan in accordance with the specifics. So there's a site plan that's prepared by DC Engineering. There are building elevations, floor plans that were drafted by Peabody Group. And this is all to formalize that. So the associated dates are with those. There was a photometric plan prepared by this company or this individual named Morgan Landon. And then there are a couple other items. So there's a revision that is due. There were some comments from a letter from the engineering department. And mostly those are technical, not mostly, those are all technical details that they'll need to address. And then the applicant still owes the city either the required public art deposit or to provide public art. My applicant's not here tonight, but they're intending on providing one of those or talking to city council about some alternative. So I'm gonna let that conversation play out with council. And they are also adding 4, while it's not required in this project, they are adding 4 proposed electric car charging stations. So we're requesting they update the plan to include those. And then the rest of these are related, kind of boilerplate ones are related to details, mostly engineering details. And actually, the last condition is to we do want to see a cross-access agreement. Right now, one property owner owns the project where the building where Testeo is, and what you'll see at your next meeting is a site plan to develop that vacant piece that's along West Road. This condition, and I haven't shared this with the applicant yet, but is to ensure that should the Testeo building be sold, that access is ensured for the future. So there would like to see some sort of agreement to that end, and that can be worked out, however it needs to be phrased, but ultimately would have to be approved by the city attorney. So those are the conditions that are on this proposal, and if you're so inclined, there is a motion to consider.
Peter, I'm sorry, I can't find the motion. I'm on the website,
Yeah.
and I'm clicking on the site consideration, and it's a 38-page document,
It's on, motion's on page 39.
and there is no 39.
Okay, I actually had to refresh it. If you try, I don't know. Try to right-click and refresh. Sometimes, and what I know about cookies is related to the cookies you eat, but sometimes that helps. I don't know if you're seeing it now.
No, but give me 1 second. I have to
Okay.
connect to the internet. That's probably my problem. Okay.
Are there any questions for Mr. Menser? So the applicant's not here tonight?
The applicant's not here this evening. So we have noticed this, regardless of kind of whether with the recommended approval or denial, we have noticed this for City Council to hold a public hearing at their meeting on February 7. And I'll communicate with the applicant after this meeting. But they were anticipating that this was happening tonight, and they very well may be watching at home.
Are there any questions for the applicant, even though he's not here? Is there any reservations about moving forward on this tonight from commissioners? Yeah, Peter, they were here at the last meeting. I think they sufficiently answered all of our questions, and I'm comfortable moving forward on this proposal tonight. Is there a motion to do so? Commissioner Williams?
I move to recommend approval of the site plan application from Gentilozzi Real Estate to construct 2 building additions, install 1 accessory building, and modify the parking lot at 3410 West Road based on the following findings. First, the proposed project is appropriately located in the M1 Manufacturing District zoning district, which allows research laboratory buildings by right subject to site plan approval. And second, the proposed project meets the standards of review for site plan approval as listed in section 50-38 of the Code of Ordinances. And the recommendation to approve the site plan is subject to the 15 conditions that are outlined in Mr. Menzer's staff report dated January 25, 2023.
Is there a second? Second. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of recommending item 7.1 for approval to the City Council, please say aye.
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 And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to item 7.2, Valley Court Park Site Plan Updates. I understand that the designer of the new plan is on the queue.
Yeah, I'd like to just provide a little preface, I guess. There's been a lot of public comment on this project, and all of it is well received, and it's we're not ignoring. I understand that that's, not all comments, I guess, make their way to the plan, but this is very much a work in progress, and I emphasize that in every sense of the word. That this is the process. I mean, it can get, it's the best way to put it. It can get kind of messy, I guess, sometimes along the way, but that is the goal here, and that's as these projects proceed through some of the public processes. This is there's a lot of input. There are changes along the way. We certainly plan on incorporating any comments that can be made. That being said, the city is working with the design team. Trevor Bosworth is here from Viridis Design, and so this item is not on for action. This item is just for discussion, kind of an update on where the team is currently at. We do plan on talking to City Council at a discussion-only meeting coming up to gauge where City Council is at with this, and ultimately, if the plan is not well received by the community, and if council chooses not to proceed with this, that may be where this ends up. So there's not necessarily, we're not trying to rush this thing through or promote a project that's not well received by the community. So, but I do want to give some insight into some of the design choices that have been made so far. And like I said earlier, all the public comment is traveling along with this as it goes. And wherever it goes, we certainly plan on sharing it with the public and having those opportunities for feedback. And I think that there will be additional opportunities if and when this moves forward. So we have Trevor joining us via Zoom tonight, and so it may be patient. It may take us a second to set him up. And I'm assuming you're on the staff memo page, and you can look at the plans on your screen. He may show the screen. I'm not sure how well that's going to come across on the overhead tonight, but if you're viewing the meeting through Zoom or after this meeting tonight, you'll want to refer to, for a cleaner version of the plans, you'll want to refer to the links in the site plan that are in the Planning Commission's meeting packet for tonight.
Mr. Menzer, could I ask so how restricted is the city in using the funds that have been allocated for this farmers market proposal? Is it dedicated specifically to building a farmers market building, or is it broader than that?
Do you know any details on that? I don't have a lot of the details on that. So you probably realize that we've had some changeover in the city in a bit here. So our former director had been leading this project so I need to do some homework to understand exactly how the funds can be allocated. I just don't know the answer to that, so I will have to get back to you on it. And our Parks Director is here, and she may be able to speak to that.
Hi, good evening. I do believe we need to get some feedback from the MEDC concerning the grant. Of course, this project is based initially in a $1 million grant from the MEDC, and it's a RAP grant, so it is specifically for infrastructure, and it uses ARPA federal funds. So there would be some restrictions, but to understand completely how much this project could change from the original grant proposal, we would still need to get that information from MEDC.
Okay. Appreciate that. So is there a restriction on timeline? Is that something you're exploring too? Not just it's 1 million from the federal government and then 1 million matching from the city, correct?
Well, the match funds are still being developed as we develop the site plan, right, and what's included in the project. So I think at this point we were looking at over $1 million in match funds. I'm looking at Mr. Menser just because I believe that he might have that in front of him and I don't.
I don't right now.
Yeah. So yes, and I'm sorry. What was the first part of that question?
Timeline, as far
The
as
timeline,
how long we have to
right.
allocate it.
So I believe that this project has to be allocated by 2024
Yeah.
and completely spent and completed by 2026.
Good.
So there's a little time, but there's not a lot of time for quite this big a project.
Any other questions? Commissioner Williams?
I'm interested in what parameters the design team was given by the city about what exactly they were asked to do. What were the goals? What exactly were they being asked to provide for in their draft? I mean, I've seen a lot of input. We've all offered our own input. We all have our own hopes and dreams about what we'd like to see in Valley Court Park. And then we see the plan and offer feedback, but I'm wondering, what were they asked to do? What were they asked to provide a performance space? That's one of the things I'm hoping for, but were they even asked for that? What exactly were the deliverables? What were they asked to design?
So we may want to let Trevor also answer this question from Veritas, but what I will tell you is that in terms of the pavilion, and I know that we've all kind of fallen into this trap of referring to it as a farmer's market, but it's meant to be a very flexible space that can be used in many ways as a pavilion in the Valley Court. So it can be used well beyond just market use. But in terms of the market, we did ask that it at least maintain the size of the current market and possibly allow for it to grow by a couple of vendors. So while I realize it looks quite like a large space, it really is trying to accommodate each of those vendor spaces that we currently have, with space for potentially just a couple more. But it also has bathrooms and some storage that we don't currently have in that park. So you have to sort of accommodate for that space as well. Bathrooms and storage were definitely asked for by the city for that park. We think that that's really important infrastructure. This is a community park. It's not a small neighborhood park, and so people may be coming, and driving and staying there for a bit of time, so restrooms are really important also. We also asked that the current farmers market does have performance space. It's a small performance space. It's meant to be an intimate performance space, and that we would have at least that kind of space. So we did not ask for an amphitheater or anything large like that. Obviously, the pavilion itself is quite large. So just something that would at least be equivalent of what we currently have in the farmers market. So those were some of the asks that I can share with you.
I'm going to, I hate the word piggyback, follow up on that. The most recent asks were really, so this is not our first iteration with the design team, were to minimize paving as much as possible. And you'll see some, and Trevor will walk you through that. And then, as Director DeChambeau mentioned, that have that public performance space. I think that came up at a recent Planning Commission meeting as well. So,
Sorry, a couple more
Yeah.
quick questions before we get to
Please.
the overview. So that land that's to the far east, that's on Evergreen right there, the city owns that land right there, correct? But right next to the tennis courts, just to the east of the tennis courts.
we do.
Okay, is there any future planned use for that land? Is there a history of that land having water issues or anything of the like?
It's a hill.
Yeah, everything would be regraded, and it's all a matter of how much we have to spend on it. And I did bring up the finances of this at the beginning to sort of set the expectations of what is possible for whatever's in this phase. And then my second question would be the Board of Water and Light building. Is there any, there's been a lot of talk about whether or not that's something we want to continue to invest in. Has there been any talk about what portion of this is designed to go towards rehabilitating or renovating that building?
The financial
Yes.
I don't think so. No. I want to preface it. I don't have all the answers tonight, and I can get those for you. The scope of the project at this point, I don't have the financial part of this equation. I just don't have it with me right now. The BWL building, initially we were looking to kind of, I think I said, like, tighten it up so that it's weatherproof. And at this point, we're not sure that that's even going to be feasible, because there's pretty significant challenges there in terms of the materials, using the original materials that were in the building or replicating those. So that might not be part of the financial scope of this, or we might not be able to do anything with that building in the short term.
So one of the potential options is that building getting demoed, and then that would open up that
More
area.
likely is that building just doesn't receive any attention at this point, and we create a plan to fund improvements to it in a different way.
Okay, understood. Any other questions, Commissioner Williams?
Is addressing the drainage problem in the park within the scope of the project?
Yeah, please.
Thank you. Yes, that absolutely is. In that, when I went to sit down, I realized that's one of the things that we did ask for, and that was a very specific ask. So that is, and you'll see, Trevor can take you through that in the new plan, sort of how they've addressed all of that.
All set, Mr. Minzer.
Thank you. So,
Mr.
Rebecca, if you wouldn't mind pulling up Trevor. There he is. Can you see and hear us, Trevor?
I can see the entire group. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I'm getting a little bit of reverb. There we go. That's better. Thank you. So first and foremost, thanks for giving us the opportunity to meet with you again tonight. And there's been some good, lively discussion so far about the plan. And as Kathy mentioned and Peter mentioned, I'd like to just bring up the plan, share my screen. I know all of you have the site plan and some other visuals with you. But if I bring it up, I might be able to just walk through a few things, and it might answer some of those questions. And then the intent here is not to represent the entire project, but just kind of highlight some of the items that have changed since the last time that it was presented in front of you. I think it was October or November. And then I'd be happy to answer any questions and give you more information. So with that, I will share my screen.
Okay, we can see
Peter,
it.
can you just give me the okay that it's up?
We can see it.
Okay. So from, I think the largest item and the focus from the previous engagement, that we heard was really minimizing the impact and minimizing the amount of impervious area within the park, and to keep as much open space as possible. And so what that means in this latest rendition of the schematic plan, and when I say schematic plan, this process isn't schematic design. And so, what that means is that there's still going to be iterations that come out of this. And so this is an advanced version of a concept. Ultimately, if this project moves forward, it would go into design development where further detail is put into it, obviously, and then into construction documentation before it would actually be built. So there's still plenty of opportunities to have input. So this is a reaction from the last plan that was shared with you. And so the two largest things, or one of the largest things that I'd like to discuss here is this bay of on the original plan. There was a bay of parking on each side of the pavilion. And so there's 24 dedicated spaces during market days, and then there'd be 24 spaces of public parking The previous plan had 48, so essentially there was 2 bays of parking on each side of the pavilion. Those on this edge and on this edge have been removed from the plan to really focus on parking, and then events, whether it's a market or some other event that's programmed within the facility, would be these 24 spaces. The 24 spaces are sized specifically based on stakeholder engagement with the farmers market, the needs that they have based on how their current market operates, discussions with other farmers markets. And so these 20 by 11 foot spaces are based on their size needs. The 10 by 10 booth spaces with a 6 foot additional clearance for that is based on input that we've received from them. As Kathy mentioned, we are still showing a public restroom. I'll call it the south end of the structure. Here we have a restroom, 2 restrooms, stalls, mechanical room, and then the storage / information side, which currently, as she mentioned, is needed within the market, and just general patrons of the park. There's currently nowhere to use a restroom. The other difference in this plan from the last is the last plan had access directly off of Valley Court in this location here. So the plaza was mostly still in front of the market, but it was bisected by this entry drive. And what we heard, I think several times, was there's some concern, one, about the general circulation off of Valley Court, and specifically the new extension of Albert at this location. The other part of that conversation that we heard was there was some concern about this becoming a cut through the park. People utilizing that as a public street to get to Hillside Court as opposed to driving around. That was another item which was addressed. I did want to point out, this has come up several times in terms of the mature trees within the park, specifically the ones that line Valley Court. So the current plan, the only tree that would be removed, there's currently a red maple tree right around this location. And just because of grades, we would want to remove that one. There are several small 3/4 inch to 1.5 inch trees that have been planted on the backside of the park in this location that would be transplanted. There's 39 additional new trees within the park. And so there's a net increase of almost an acre of urban canopy. So based on the trees that are being removed here, actually I misspoke. There's 2 trees that are being removed. There's a white pine next to the existing sign in this location here, if you can see my cursor, and there's a red maple in this location. For the new universal accessible playground, those 2 would be removed. 39 would be new trees, 3 inch or taller, or 3 inch caliper or larger would be part of this project for a net increase of over 42,000 square feet of new canopy within the park. In regards to the stormwater quality, that has always been, it's obvious when you're there at the park, whether you're there for the market or you're there in the spring, or if you're there during events or you just want to play frisbee in the grass. There's a compaction issue. This park sits at one of the lowest elevations. It has a watershed that directly drains to this low area. There's significant water that comes in from the north, from these higher streets here. There is water that comes, the question about the easterly part of the park, that is, majority of the swale where the water comes down into the park this way, and it all sits at that lowest spot next to the existing parking lot, next to the basketball court. The intention of this plan, while there is an overall reduction of open space, there is a net increase of around 14,000 square feet of native plantings, and those native plantings would be, utilizing rain gardens and bioswales at key places to intercept and get that first flush of stormwater, so that, one, we can slow the stormwater down that enters the park before it goes into the combined sewer Two, the plants can uptake and cleanse that stormwater, and ultimately reduce the amount and the volume ever leaving the park. These are strategically placed in these locations, specifically in this location where it's the flattest, is to intercept that water and actually have it run through these natural systems that we take stormwater off of the roof or off of these impervious surfaces like the parking lot and direct those into rain gardens for that first flush prior to ever entering a storm sewer. If any of the water in a larger event there would be an overflow within these systems. Similarly, along the north edge here, any of this pavement area would drain to the rain garden swale here, or in this area. The south end of the building would be flanked by naturalized plantings. All of the existing honey locusts along Valley Court would remain. They're important. They're a design element that need to be designed around. So those trees would remain in place. We would have expansive soil management around those and tree protection during the course of the construction period, in addition to the additional 39 new trees within the park. Another comment that we heard too was in regard to the programming of the site, and on the original concept that was submitted for the grant, there was 5 food truck on the west side of this parking lot. So these 12 spaces were also dual purpose if you had food truck days. And what we heard was that 5 food trucks are unnecessary, and are there other opportunities to utilize, food trucks or markets, or mobile food services without increasing the footprint within the park. And so you'll see on this concept, the T intersection here we provided this drop-off area that could service 2 to 3 food trucks, depending on their size, that would open up to the street side and then ultimately open up into this public plaza area here. So we're taking an existing impervious surface, reutilizing it for this crosswalk connection here, and then providing this place out front without increasing the amount of impervious surface within the park. A few small other details in regards to dialing in the playground a little bit. There were some questions from the community and others in regards to the size of the playground. The playground is generally the same size as the existing playground. It's actually a little bit larger, but because it would have a unitary surface or this poured in place surfacing, it gives the playground the freedom to do something in regards to have it more inclusive, provide universal access to all of the proposed play features. It allows, in typical playground areas, you see a lot of, you have a 5 to 12 area, and you have under 5, and you separate the age groups. This design, while it's not fully fleshed out yet, allows a little bit more flexibility. We also heard there was some concern maybe that this playground was closer to the street or closer to the parking than the existing. Generally speaking, this playground, the play components are within 5 feet of the same distance off of the parking area. But since we are closer and we have this unitary surface, we are proposing that there would be an ornamental fence behind the existing sidewalk between that and the landscape to provide a little bit more comfort for kids that would just dart right out of the playground area. The playground also will be surrounded by this native landscape, which will be twofold. One, to increase biodiversity within the park. Excuse me. The other is to create some of those feelings of visual buffers, keeping things low, but providing a sense of enclosure there, so it doesn't feel like you're in the wide open, but there's still good sight lines from the street for safety reasons. I think that's generally it. In terms of the changes since the last, I'd be happy to listen to your comments or take your questions.
Before we do that, I just want to note that Commissioner Hendricks joined us at 7:42. there any questions from commissioners? Commissioner Boyd?
Concerning the playground, are we replacing everything that we already have, or are we using the existing playground, swings, slide, all that kind of stuff?
That's a good question, because on the original drawings, I think it said relocated playground.
Right.
And after discussion, looking at we have certified playground safety inspectors on staff here, that the cost to replace and move what's there would be similar to building new. And by building new, it does give a few more options in terms of, like I was just discussing, whether this is a nature-based playground or it's tailored specifically for specific groups. We know that based on the scope that we've heard from the city, is that the playground should be more universally accessible, meaning more aspects of the playground should be accessible to all kids, and that the play between kids should be more dynamic and inclusive than it currently is. So that was a decision here, is if we looked at actually replacing the existing playground. So this would all be new equipment, now we're using the existing.
And then concerning the tennis courts, just so I understand, are we going to repave them? Are we doing something different with the tennis courts, pickleball courts? What's going on with that?
Yeah, so back to that question about, it was asked about what direction or what guidance was given to us. And so when the grant opportunity came about and we were engaged by the city, the park staff and the planning staff and others, was to focus on, the grant requirements. And what we heard is this multi-use space that specifically addressed the opportunities for new program, existing program, programming in the site, but not look at redesigning the entire park. That a higher level plan would need to be developed in concert or with this planning exercise. So we haven't looked at, nor is any of the repair or the resurfacing of these existing tennis courts part of this project. It's specifically within this existing walk, the existing gardens to this edge is kind of the scope of the work. There has been comments specifically about the tennis courts, and we know based on comments that the Parks Department has received that there is a desire to keep some of the tennis court facilities. There's also a desire to have pickleball in the park at some point. There's been also, questions about, well, could you just remove the existing basketball court and move that over and have all the court games in one corner of the park, which are all valid. I think the decision in terms of this plan right now is knowing that the existing basketball court is very popular. It's part of that farmers market that could easily be saw cut, and the parking lot can be removed. So that program element can stay there until a decision is made about the condition and the reactivation of the tennis courts or pickleball courts, or moving a new basketball court in those locations. I don't know if Kathy, if you want to respond to that as well.
Thanks, Trevor. I think Trevor covered kind of what that scope of work was. The tennis courts are obviously on our radar and have been for a bit. And the thought really is to look at keeping at least one of the courts and then possibly having that option for pickleball also there. And we have heard from folks, just like Trevor said, that the basketball court at Valley Court is very popular. We know that. And we have no intention of not having that amenity. But we have heard from people who said, well, why can't you just put the basketball court on top of the tennis courts? And I think one of those things is we tend to shy away from taking away amenities that we know folks are using. And so, if there's a need for tennis courts there, I certainly saw people playing tennis there this summer when I would walk through the park. You see people playing basketball. We know that people like pickleball right now also, so maybe this is a redevelopment of that area, but this would speak to another phase with another, we would need to seek out some additional funding to do that, but it's definitely on our radar, and it is an asset that we have flagged that needs work for sure. So.
I think one of my frustrations with the plan, both the original plan and this one, is one that we've heard from the public as well, is that this is a large structure with a lot of pavement that kind of breaks up the green space of the park. And so I wonder, have we considered perhaps relocating the BWL building to a different part of the park, or integrating that building into some design and using that kind of triangle end, that far west end of the park, for a pavilion?
I'll speak to it.
I was going to say, anyone can answer.
Yeah, I'll speak to it, and I'll do my best. And I'm kind of shooting from the hip here. The BWL building was moved to that site. Do you know when? Do you mind joining me at the? Thank you. 2017, I want to say.
No,
It,
way earlier than that.
20.
I'm going to say 2007.
Long time ago.
2006, yeah.
And I want to say the price tag on that was a couple $100,000. It was significantly expensive, so it was put there. So to answer, short answer to your question is no, we have not considered that, given the cost and then the status of the property in the historic district. So no, that hasn't been considered. It can certainly be considered in a future iteration or wherever this project ends up going. So no, that hasn't been considered yet. It's a good idea.
Can I have a follow-up question to that? Is this a contributing structure to the historic district?
It's, I guess I don't know. I can find out.
Okay. I was going to say technically it shouldn't be,
Yeah,
because it's
hold on,
relocated. It's not
do
in
you
its original context.
Please stand up, introduce yourself,
Okay.
and then you can speak.
Hi, I'm Darcy Schmidt, Senior Planner. Yes, it is contributing. That is considered in the historic district, so it did go through the historic approval process. It was given to us by Lansing Board of Water and Light, and we moved it to that area, but it's still contributing because it is in the historic district.
It's interesting. Okay.
Mr. Wagner?
I have a question about just the green space in general. I agree about, I wanted to maximize green space, and it's sort of a shame to pave over green space in a park. And I've noticed looking at these buildings, when I go to the park, I see a lot of kids playing soccer or football or frisbee, and we have one structure this way and another structure this way, and not a square field. Has that been any thought, Trevor or anyone, about having a space where people could play a game on the grass?
It was considered, and it is looked at. I think I want to go back to the comment or the question about, was it ever looked at this building to be in the west end of the park? And it was several times actually. It was looked at in its current location. It was looked at moving into the existing open area in front of the Board and Water and Light building. But one of the things that we've heard too is that there are competing program elements within the park. We hear about music in the park or those kind of things, and so we wanted to be sympathetic to locating the structure in a place that yes would bookend or would be an anchor at the end of a mixed-use district. And then by having the building in the middle, then it allows those existing open spaces, for instance, in the Board and Water and Light building, if that then wants to become sort of programmed element, whether it's a cafe or whether it's a outdoor music venue that would be going on at the same time that a market might be going on, it allows those larger spaces to still operate in that function or have the flexibility to operate in that function. We have not specifically laid down a 100-foot or 100-yard, 50-yard football field, but we can certainly do that. And it was our understanding that most of the active recreation park is mostly casual. But if we know what those requirements are or what the size of those fields would need to be, then we can certainly look at that.
Any other questions from commissioners? Mr. Vinall?
I know at a previous meeting, I had asked if there had been any systematic environmental review of the park. And I know, Trevor, you addressed the stormwater issue that a number of us have brought up, but has there been any broader environmental review of the park?
When you say broader environmental review, what specifically of review are you asking?
I guess I'm wondering not only about stormwater, and you've addressed a couple of concerns about existing trees and how most of those would remain, but I think one of the questions that I have walking through I actually walked through this park today knowing that I was going to be at this meeting. And I wonder, do we have any sense of what the green space that exists contributes to, I don't want to use the word like, what's that?
Quality of life?
No, not necessarily quality of life. It's a resiliency zone, right? It because it's this green space in a otherwise paved and heavily dense area. I wonder, do we consider it to be? I like how
I know where you're headed.
Do you, okay.
I do, yeah.
Okay, good.
So yes, and you know, being a landscape architect and practicing in this for a number of years, you know, that is the number one thing, right? It's about sense of place, but it's being responsible stewards in an ever dwindling concrete jungle. At the same time, there is a need for a community to come together and to have areas for programmatic use, you know, for those activities. In regards to, I guess, the question about, you know, what's the environmental value of this park currently? Currently, it has, I would say, less than ideal amount of urban canopy. It is almost 100% European turf grass. That, you know, the root zone on turf grass is around 4 inches. On a park that's heavily used like this, it also gets driven on during events. The soils are very compacted. They're heavy clay on the site. So there's not a lot of current infiltration that happens. That's why you see some of the issues that you do. Being at the bottom of a watershed, there's not much to slow water down in terms of the runoff coefficient. So the runoff coefficient, and you know, the worst is pavement. The second worst is gravel. The third is then turf grass. And then the fourth, better, I'm getting better, is landscaping. And then native plants done in a way which we're talking about, which, native forbs and grasses, those root zones go down 4 to 6 feet. And so that's really the difference, both from the fact that they don't need to be watered as much because the root systems are so deep, but that root mass and that biomass from the root systems can manage and take toxins and all the grits and oils and things out of that urban runoff. So it's really about, I want to just express, while the open space amount is less than what it currently is, it's also about the quality of the open space that's there. If it's strictly about size, it's about areas for active recreation, then turf grass is the best thing, right? It gives you the flexibility to have games and those kind of things. But in regards to plant material, and if we're talking about biodiversity, water quality, pollinators, really making a difference in terms of the discharge that comes off of this site and eventually goes into the Red Cedar River. It's these kind of natural systems that are very important for that. And so I would just say that by increasing the urban tree canopy, by including native vegetation specifically designed to manage stormwater runoff, is a biological increase than where the park is currently of just a static turf grass park.
Trevor, following up on that question, did I hear you say that the location for this building was picked because it would help with some of the water issues that the park has? So because of the little retention ponds and water basins that you're putting there, is that why you chose the location in the middle?
It's part of it, yeah, because we can elevate that space, and actually that long space between, I'll call it the eastern edge and the lowest spot in the park, which is right here. By bringing this grade up a bit, we're actually intercepting the stormwater that's coming from the east and north and diverting it down to a centralized location. If you're there under heavy storm or after a storm or in the spring, you'll notice this area is one of the wettest in the park, along with this area back here along Hillside Court. I wouldn't say that was the driver of the location of the pavilion, but it certainly does help manage the existing stormwater runoff better in this location than it would tuck down into the one of the corners of the park.
Commissioner Wagner?
I have one more question for you. So, farmers markets in East Lansing, the East Lansing Farmers Market is used once a week for less than half a year. What other uses do you see for this building?
Yeah, and Kathy was right, and we're guilty of putting farmers market and talking about the farmers market a lot. I think part of that is because of, them being a stakeholder in the park. But this size of structure then can be used for a myriad of different events. However, the downtown citizens, it could become a rental space. It could be used for larger music events. It could be used for different types of markets, different types of art fairs. It's a gathering space that could be significant in terms of, if it wasn't a market based on the size, you could use 15 square per person. You could fit 250 to 350 people under that pavilion in a non-market day using up the full space. So I don't know if Kathy has, any more input on other types of uses that could foresee being used, but it really is a multi-purpose pavilion within the park, not specifically intended only for the farmers market.
I think Trevor covered most of those, but we definitely talked about, the possibility for other kinds of markets other than just food markets, having an art market or a maker's market, to have it as a rental space for events, potentially to even have yoga classes there on a afternoon or a morning, or some kind of art classes. It can be used in a multitude of ways, and with a capacity for that many folks, you can use half of it for one thing and half of it for another even. And when you look at our strategic priorities, especially coming out of COVID, that ability to gather outside has become so much more important, and to have some protection from the weather, some kind of covered space that you can use to gather. I know that our pavilion at Patriarch Park is incredibly popular, and we rent that, during the nice months, but we get inquiries all year round of people who would like to go out there and use it. The vision for this is that at some point we may be able to incorporate some screening or some pull-down kind of doors that can make it last even longer into the cold weather, so that you're protected a little bit more even from the elements, and can use it longer into the year. So,
any other questions from commissioners before I get into my thoughts and comments? No? Okay. So first off, I'm a big fan of the existing farmers market. I do think that generally the trend is for people to want to eat healthier and buy local, and there's a lot of benefits to that being sort of our community hub, really, right? Our gathering space, and I would love to see more uses and broader uses of that. But like a lot of others have said, I just don't think that we're quite there yet with this plan. I think that there's some issues and some concerns with it. Big fan, big proponent of having broader uses for the building. I think the more that we can maximize that and adjust that for taking into consideration weather and doing those things that were mentioned is a really good idea. But my overall thought with what we're trying to do here is there's just too much for this park. It just doesn't have as much of an identity. There's just a lot going on here. You've got the BWL building, the playground, the tennis courts, basketball, the roundabout gardens that are still there, and I believe those sidewalks and gardens were kept to kind of maximize the amount of funds we have available to develop this, and I understand that, but and I know there's water issues, but I would ideally like to see the building not in the smack dab in the middle of the park, right? I think that's a consistent theme we're seeing here. If there's a way to put that on the west end by the BWL building or over by the tennis courts and kind of reconfigure that space, I think that would be ideal. There's some other minor things that don't really make sense to me. I don't, for the life of me, can't figure out why the band shell is facing the way that it is, kind of to nowhere. I think that at a minimum needs to be repositioned, maybe put to the north of the building, or if the building's reconfigured in some way that faces where actually the people are going to be gathering and sitting. I think that would be more ideal. And the basketball court just kind of sticks out to me, and I know it's a popular amenity. I think we should do everything we can to keep it. It's just more concrete, right? Is there a way that we could configure that basketball court into the parking lot for the farmers market building, or could we even use that building to have interior basketball like I've seen in other spots? I just think that there's more ways we could get creative with this. I understand the financial limitations, but I think, to me, the worst case scenario is if we let this opportunity to go by. I think there's a lot of opportunities to do a lot of really good things for the city, and plus, as someone that lives just a few blocks north of here, I spent a lot of time in this park. I'd like to spend even more time in this park for more activities and more events. But I want to continue the discussion and see what we can do to improve this plan and really take into consideration what the public is saying with this. So with that, are there any additional questions or comments on that? Oh, Commissioner Denault.
One of the other concerns that I think I have, I used to run a farmer's market in Chicago, and I tried really hard when I moved here to East Lansing to become more integrated with the local food producers around the community. And one of the things that I have heard from many of them is they would love to be at a farmer's market every day of the week in order to sell their products, but they generally don't have capacity to be at a market every day of the week and also to be producing the things that they're bringing to market. And so I think I'm concerned for food producers who already are attending markets on Wednesday at the Allen Street Market and the Meridian Township Market, and then the Meridian Township Market again on Saturday. And there's many other markets in the area, and I just wonder if I don't want to say spreading our food producers too thin, but if we're expecting if we build it, they will come. Like, everyone will want to be a vendor at this market. And I just don't know if the food producer community has that kind of capacity to meet another market. And so I know that that's a concern that the vendors who I had at my Chicago market had. They would have loved to be at a market every week, but they could only make Wednesday and Saturday work because they're a family, and it was just them. So that's, I think, a concern that I would also like to keep in our minds as we're thinking about expanding a market.
Would it be proper to phrase that as, is there a market for a market? Seriously, yeah? Okay.
Mr. Menzer, we did have conversations with vendors as part of this process, right? Overall, what was that feedback?
Oh man, I don't know if I could summarize that. They had a lot of comments I could share. Like, do you have it off the top of your head?
Kind of.
Okay, I'll look through my notes. I just don't
They
remember.
were one of the first groups that we talked to, frankly. They were excited. They were pleased to have something that protects them from the elements and that they don't have to do quite as much setup, to have restrooms, to have storage space. All of those kinds of things they were very pleased with. They were pleased with the size of the spaces. Peter, do you have any other comments from? Do
I'm
you
looking
recall
through my
from
notes.
that?
I don't remember anything. It was quite a while ago.
Yeah. So we took comments from vendors both at the market, and we had a private meeting with them as well where they could weigh in. So positive comments.
And those are vendors who already participate in the market?
In East Lansing's market, yes. Yes. Yep.
Yeah, I think my concern was more if we're building a structure that looks to expand the market, will we get more producers participating? Yeah.
Understood.
But I definitely appreciate that they were a major stakeholder group that was consulted.
So quickly, my follow-up to that then would be, I'm not looking for an exact number, but how does this compare to our existing footprint as far as the number of vendors? Is it 20% bigger, 10% bigger? What's a ballpark for that?
So it can differ on various days because sometimes a vendor who is coming every Sunday can't make a particular Sunday. Weather can impact whether folks show up. But this is just a couple more. And Trevor, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this. If you recall, this is just a couple more booths more than what our capacity is currently.
Oh, it was a question of capacity I had. So this has the capacity for just a few more than what we
Yeah.
have right now. It
Yeah,
just,
just
does
a-
it
just a
allow them more
couple more.
space to sell their?
I think that the spaces are a little bit larger, Trevor. They're based on the feedback from both the vendors and the farmers market manager, correct? That the space that we had you draw up is what they need to adequately set up.
Correct, yeah, so there are 24 existing spaces. There was 24 put back in there, or for this project. The current spaces are smaller because they're standard parking lot size spaces. And there was both in person at the market comments about the size of the stalls, getting a little bit wider to 10 feet versus 9 and a little bit deeper than what the 18s are there. And I think it should be noted too that our team, not only myself, but MAAC Group, we did attend markets. And we conversed with the vendors. We talked with people that were at the market to try to understand what they appreciated about the market and the kind of improvements they'd like to see happen there. So.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from commissioners on this item? Commissioner Williams?
I guess I'd like to follow up on Chairperson Sullivan's comment about the band shell and the performance space. I'm confused by that as well. And maybe Trevor, you could speak to that a little bit. I think at one point we had talked about having some sort of an orientation of the performance space so that there could be a covered area for the people who are not only performing but also listening, and it doesn't look like that provides this. And also I wonder if, as we talk about the orientation of this, whether the BWL building was ever considered, and you may have touched on this, Trevor, as a part of a band shell or a backdrop to a performance area or something like that. It's a charming building. It seems like something it would be nice to look at as you listen to a performance.
So I can talk specifically on the labeling of the band shell on the plan. So that band shell would be a small covered area specifically for small performers, similar as Kathy mentioned. Right now, there's currently a fabric awning structure at the south end of the basketball court. So they have music going during farmers markets. And we heard that was important to have a covered space for performers as people are mingling and shopping within the market, knowing that the market is full, or there's people in the inside. So that band shell orientation is really to capture if events whether it's a farmer's market or other event, if you had a performer out along Valley Court Street, that whole foreground, that Gateway Plaza area, could be filled with tables and chairs separated from the covered pavilion. The other option, programming option to not box everyone in the same space, is that on a non-farmers market day, you could set up a stage within the actual covered pavilion on the, let's call it the north end, and have seating in there for that 250 to 300 people, depending on tables or chairs. So there's another size of performance space. So I think of this as street, more like street side performances, plaza, what we're calling the band shell. This is like 15, 20 feet wide. Then you have this space where you have a fully covered pavilion space with people attending underneath that structure. And then if there was an event within the market, maybe it's a music festival that you had on site, where you had multiple options, is that, the Board of Water and Light building, because of this east-facing path off of that structure, this existing open space is almost perfect for another sized event that could happen off the lawn, and maybe there's other food vendors or food trucks around there. So it wasn't trying to lock in one specific amphitheater or band shell. It was to give, specific programming options for different scales of events, if that makes sense.
Thanks.
Any further comments? Seeing none. Peter, we don't have to take action on this item tonight. There's nothing we're voting on. Correct?
No, it was not expected. This was intended for exactly what it became, is just a comment session on the current iteration of the plan. And I just want to summarize by thanking everyone for their comments. Designing by committee it's never an easy process, kind of no matter what. We're planning on bringing this to City Council for just discussion. Not action, not a public hearing. As you know, in the past, we had talked about having, the site plan process was started for this. Right now, that's kind of on hold, and what we're planning on doing was having kind of final comments, and by final, I mean just temporarily final comments on this, going to City Council, because they really have not had a chance to review this plan and provide comment. So really go to them and see where we're at with this. Should we, knowing all of the comments that have been received to date, both positive and negative, is this a direction that council thinks is worthwhile for staff to continue on in? Or do we need to put this project on pause, revisit it in the future? Maybe it's part of before COVID, there was an effort to kind of consider the entire Valley Court area as a planning, and this is before I came along, but look at a master plan for that entire area. So do we take a step back and kind of do a holistic view of the entire area, and the farmers market does or does not become a part of what that future area it becomes? So all of that is kind of in the air at this moment, but I think it's appropriate to go to council and get some policy direction on them before we get any further with this. So that's the plan, and we should know more on, coincidentally, Valentine's Day. So that's the next discussion only meeting. We're planning on having this on their agenda, and that's certainly subject to change, but I'll keep you in the loop as we proceed towards that.
Thank you, Mr. Menzer. So council would take a look at this, provide further suggestions, and then potentially if there is a site plan down the line, then it would come back to Planning Commission.
Potentially, yeah.
Understood.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to item 7.3, reintroduction of the Shaping the Avenue draft form-based code. Mr. Menzer? Yeah,
so what I'd like to do is, and you've met my colleague Taylor Van Winkle, so I'm reintroducing her. I'm going to invite Taylor up to the table here, and I'm going to step aside. And this is really, well, I'm going to do a little more preface before Taylor gets here. We talked about this at the last couple of meetings. The Shaping the Avenue initiative has been around for a while. This is our attempt at kind of reintroducing the concept, because a lot of the faces have changed since that time. And then right in the middle of all that was COVID. And as discussed previously, the kind of the overall ordinance itself hasn't seen a lot of daylight with this group, and certainly with members of the public. It just kind of got interrupted as the rest of life got interrupted with COVID. So we would like to ease back into this, and I think part of that was just a reintroduction to the code itself, what it means, kind of what the implications are for it. There was a lot of time and effort put into, I know some of you, I believe, Commissioner Williams and our former chairperson, current vice chair Bowman, and I believe another member of this group, Commissioner Wolf. Sorry, Commissioner Wolf. I know you're going to see that, and I did not mean to forget you. So we just want to bring this back and start talking about it again. So over the next couple meetings, that's the plan. Taylor's going to kick it off tonight. You remember our senior planner, Darcy Schmidt, who has been involved with this from the get-go, and we wanted to have her here to provide some context as well. So please, Darcy, feel free to join the conversation. I am going to step aside, and who knows, I may pop back up again in a second. Thank you.
All right. Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm Taylor Ranwinkle. I'm an associate planner with the city. And tonight I'm just going to do a reintroduction of Shaping the Avenue, we'll do a little bit of context on how it was originally created, and then we'll go into a little bit about what it actually is, and we'll go dig a little bit deeper about how it does the things it says it does, and then we'll talk about looking to the future and how we're going to tackle it in the next few months. All right. So for context, in 2017, it really emerged from an intermunicipal collaboration between Lansing, East Lansing, Lansing and Meridian Townships that actually had the same exact name. It was also called Shaping the Avenue. And it was led primarily by the Capital Area Transportation Authority and some private planning firms. And it was designed primarily to promote development and connection between those municipalities along the Grand River corridor, so connecting them, developing them similarly, together. And then, because of the fact that that was such a large scale, it didn't really get implemented. And so East Lansing's portion of that Shaping the Avenue program, form-based code program, proceeded into committee discussions on a smaller scale, and those lasted for quite a while, between 2017, 2020, and actually even into 2021 a bit. And it was discussed where those boundaries would be, what that language would entail. And then, and now, 2022, we're reintroducing it, giving it some blood again. So this is what Shaping the Avenue actually looks like right now in the draft regulating plan. And it's primarily oriented around the downtown with some surrounding neighborhood residential areas as well. And it primarily utilizes frontages to guide structural development, and it permits a lot more mixed uses than a lot of the zoning code exists as it exists now. So we're gonna dig a little bit more into what form-based code is and what frontages are in this case. So as far as form-based code goes, form-based code differs from traditional, what's called Euclidean zoning, primarily in that traditional zoning groups things based on their use as opposed to their form or function. So for example, having a retail district separate from a residential district, or a commercial district separate from a research and development district. So that was primarily done originally when industrial facilities were created like significant nuisances and pollution, like noise, light, waste, things like that. And they wanted to keep industrial areas really, really far away from residential areas. And that's still effective, and today, we wouldn't want to do that today either, but it does create some limitations on mixing those uses that are more compatible, like retail and commercial uses together with more residential uses. So, form-based code does that. It regulates based on form of the built environment as opposed to uses, and it allows multiple uses to occupy the same district. So it aligns multiple uses in the same district, more focusing on the exteriors of buildings, placement of buildings, their lots,
lot structure, configuration, and even the designs of the streets and the public spaces. So allowing that mixture of uses allows more flexibility in the use of all of the spaces together, and it has some side effects like increasing walkability and things like that. In terms of how popular form-based code is or how established it's been around since the 1980s in general as a concept, but over the last 2 decades, it's been a lot more popular domestically and internationally. In 2006, East Lansing did a small form-based code practice in the East Village District, which allowed for mixed uses, residential and retail, in the same spaces in the area along the Red Cedar River down there. So a little bit more into what form-based codes look like. Form-based codes have 4 components, all of them do. They have a regulating plan, which designates where the building standards are going to apply, where those frontages apply. They're going to have building standards that regulate the form, the configuration, and the function of those buildings. They're going to have standards relating to the public realm, such as sidewalks or trees, bicycle lanes, things like that. And then they'll also have administrative standards which streamline the application process in line with the city's master plan. So the idea with the streamlining the administrative processes is that if you create guidelines that are already aligned with the master plan, then that incentivizes the developers to give you things that you already want, and it streamlines that process, makes it faster for review, things like that. So what are frontages? How do they look different than zoning districts that we have now? They're very similar in function, but frontages classify based more on place-specific areas or factors and are oriented more towards regulating the development of street space, like height, building size, setbacks, things like that, as opposed to regulating the uses. It does dictate what uses are permitted, but it allows for more mixed uses to exist in the same space as long as the form and function align. The STA uses 3 different classifications of frontages, the first and most common being the mixed-use frontages, which accommodates a range of residential, office, institutional, and retail uses. It's oriented towards areas with high foot traffic. The mixed-use frontages range from 1 to 4, each increasing in height allowed and density allowed. And you'll find that throughout the classification types. There is a storefront frontage type, and this is primarily an overlay that adds additional standards over a mixed-use frontage. So that specifically applies to commercial areas, or more densely commercial areas in the downtown area. And then lastly, you'll have the residential frontage classification type. And those also range in an increasing density format from 2 to 5. And with the lowest oriented mostly towards residential cottages, the middle starts to begin introducing townhomes, and then the highest levels allow more limited commercial development on the ground floors. What with different types of housing being mixed together and of course allowed within each of them, except for the more restrictive lower density ones. And then the other component that form-based codes offer are street and public realm standards that regulate pedestrian travel, bicycle travel, auto travel, and transit traffic to balance that streetscape so that there's wider streets, bicycle lanes, all next to auto traffic and everything like that. So those standards are also included in the draft as it stands now. So that moves us on to how to discuss this and how we're going to look for it in the future meetings that we have. So we're looking at bringing it back to discussion to the Plan Commission, y'all, in February to talk about the phased implementation. So that boundary discussion, really digging into those facts and figures about why we chose that area, why those boundaries are chosen, selected, if they should be moved, how they can be moved, how can they be changed, what would be the best and most ideal area to implement the STA in a phased manner. So that's set aside for that discussion. There's 2 meetings in February, so we can have a discussion and then a addressing meeting, right? And then in March, we'll have a similar system where we'll discuss language, primarily focusing on conflicts between the STA code and the existing code. One such example is the electrical vehicle requirement and aligning those language-wise, and of course identifying things that we can change based on just language-wise, or things that need to actually be addressed by the Planning Commission or even by City Council more policy-wise. So those are, that'll be set aside for discussing where those align and how we can change things on our end and what things are out of our control in that manner. And then after those discussions, we look towards April through July for intentional public outreach. So having educational materials, distributing them to community, educating them on what the STA is, how to look for them, how to look for their neighborhood, what their houses will look like, how they'll be impacted, and what that will be for them. So if it were to be implemented and getting support and feedback and integrating those things. So that's where we stand now. If there's any questions on what the STA is, anything like that, or on how this timeline will plan out, I'm here to answer them.
Any questions from commissioners? Commissioner Williams?
And maybe Darcy can answer this because it's a history question and a
Excellent.
memory question for me, and I'm not sure my memory on this is particularly clear because of kind of the delay between what I'm asking you about and where we are today. Last I recall, we transmitted a document to the City Council with a memo outlining certain issues and, as I recall, asking for some feedback, policy direction, in particular on things like their interest in the form-based code approach to a streamlined approval process, because we'd spent a lot of time drafting, considering, going through this proposed document, and just felt like we needed more direction from them about whether they were receptive to some of these concepts before we put in any additional work. So I'm just wondering, did anything ever happen to that?
That's a good question. We had actually pulled all that stuff together, talked about what the memo needed to say, and then COVID happened.
Right.
So that never occurred, which probably wouldn't have mattered anyways because it's a whole new council and everything.
Right.
But I do want to step back a little bit. Taylor did a wonderful job explaining what form-based code is, but 2017 is when the process started for the entire corridor. The master plan started in 2013, and we actually spent 4 years working on, we had divided up different groups into housing, transportation, environment. So in each one of those groups, we had 11 community members. And those community members were from different boards and commissions. They were from different neighborhoods. We had members from MSU. We had, especially for housing, depending on which topic, but we'll revert to just housing. We had landlords all in one committee. And they spent 4 years talking through what the concerns were residents had with increasing intensity in the neighborhoods, what the landlords' concerns were with not being able to. We were back then concerned about the lack of land for housing. As we all know, that's been a problem for many years. And we were hoping that we could find some opportunities for redevelopment, infill development. So the comprehensive plan, if you look back to that, is reflected in the form-based code. The only difference is Ms. Williams, Mr. Bowman, and Mr. Wolf spent an enormous amount of time working with staff to take that document that was designed by a consultant working on the entire corridor and rewriting it, completely rewriting it, to make it clear, concise, and to fit into the City of East Lansing's standards and concerns for the community. And it's a really solid document to start from, but I think, like you said, we had the commission as a whole, the 3 members that worked on it, would present it to the Planning Commission every couple of months and let them know what their concerns are, what they came up with, and so before taking it out to the community, we really needed the buy-in from the City Council, and that was a step that we were at the time. And those can be resurrected and given to our staff, and we can start over at that spot. But there was never any intention of it going to city council and that being done. It was a process where going to city council, getting city council's feedback, coming back to the planning commission, doing the work, and then going to city council, introducing it as an ordinance. And once it was would be introduced as an ordinance, it would go back out to the community. So there was multiple opportunities to have additional feedback. And because it's been so long from the time that city council saw it, even the comprehensive plan, the schedule that is placed on the screen there is an absolutely good idea to start from, especially pulling out some of where we were when COVID hit and kind of starting from that base.
Well, no wonder I couldn't find that memo.
Yeah, it never, it did not come, it was drafted, but it did not get distributed because of
Okay.
COVID.
That clears it up. Thank you.
Yes, good memory.
Thank you. And thanks for your presentation, Taylor. I'm excited to start back up discussions on this topic. I think there's a lot of potential there. And I recall the meetings being very interesting that we had back at the beginning of the pandemic, I think is when we had those. So are there any further questions from commissioners? Okay, thank you. All right, that brings us on to item 8, new business. There is none. Item 9, commissioner concerns. Are there any concerns from commissioners? I'll just bring up one item. I think we still have one opening for an applicant for the Planning Commission. So, Peter, where are we at with that process?
Make the run. So we haven't, the status hasn't changed.
Okay.
The only thing that has changed is we are a small, this is a small victory, but the vacancies are being listed on the city council agendas now. So that's one avenue to hopefully get more eyes on this. We do have our council liaison, Councilmember George Brookover, that is always looking for more people to join our ranks. And I'm sure that we'll do another social media blast here soon, as we do almost quarterly, I think, looking for, because there are a lot of vacancies. If you see the council agenda, there's a lot of vacancies. We're looking for someone for just about every group in the city right now. It's just a challenging time to find volunteers for commissions.
Great.
So hope to have an update for you soon.
All right. Well, thanks for the update. I believe a motion to adjourn is in order, unless there's any other questions or comments from commissioners?
So moved.
All right.
Second.
All right. Moved by Commissioner Williams, second by Commissioner Denault. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The motion carries. We are adjourned at 8:39 p.m. Thanks, everyone.